For sure. All right. This is Charles.
This is Emanuel.
And you are listening to
Blight Makes Right.
The original Legion of Everblight podcast.
The original!
How are you doing, buddy?
It's good to be back, brother.
It's been a couple weeks now.
It has.
You have a good Thanksgiving?
Have a fantastic Thanksgiving. How about yourself?
Not too bad. I'm very thankful for double chosen lists and no incorporeal within 10 inches of like my army.
Yep. Me too. I have to say that if I were thankful for something, I would have to say it'd be Hellmouths. Hellmouths are amazing.
Oh, hell a good time. Yeah, so since we last recorded with David, I've actually done 2 tournaments.
Oh,
I did a tournament up in Bellingham, and I did a tournament at Mox in Bellevue. So I'm excited to talk about lists. It's been so good, like coming back to the game, doing that first tournament as like, here, get 5 games in real quick in one day. Well, not real quick, right? It was like basically a whole day. But doing that and then like working on getting some practice games and stuff in, start testing lists and like get those cobwebs off, dirt off the shoulder, and now like after that, get some practice in, like warm up, get all my Broken Egg Games tokens organized and everything. Like
something
ice switches are here, like everything's here. But then getting to go and do a couple of tournaments, and it's like the difference that I felt even after just like 2 to 3 weeks of like preparation and organization and watching videos and stuff. Like I feel like 100 times more prepared. It felt so good by comparison.
Nice.
I
hear you on that.
You also have the Legion army is in front of you. You have been painting it, and now you actually get to like play games with it.
Yes, I have been grinding out as many games as possible, and I wanted to throw myself into some of my bad matchups right away. I'm not just like playing Scorn.
You are a masochist like that.
I am. I want to get hurt bad first, but it's kind of like jumping into a pool of cold water. Like there's that initial shock where you're like, oh crap! But if you start there, it's like when you first started the game, you first started against Asphyxias too, right? Like, and by comparison, everything was a little bit easier. I feel that way about a lot of things. If I start at something hard, then when I get down to where it should be, I'm like, oh wow, this is smooth. And so I played some games with Animag, I played some games with Kallus, I played some games with Apollonia, and I'm really feeling the Blight.
Oh, for sure. It's interesting. So obviously, like coming from what I was playing in Mark II, when I was first starting to glance at stuff, like Oracles of Annihilation really was pulling my attention, right? Because it was basically like I can play Veil 2 Machinations of Shadow with like every caster.
Yes.
Right? That's what it felt like to me at first glance. But the game is very different now. And that's not necessarily something that you want to do, because there's a huge advantage to having a diverse list that has the potential to be scoring all the zones, not just contesting them. And so I did immediately have some inclinations after starting playing. Like, I want to see what Primal Terrors is like. And holy crap, it feels like I'm playing a scenario game, like all the time. So has that been your experience so far with your games, trying out Animag and Kallus and whatnot?
I would say that overall, coming back to Mark III, scenario focus has been much higher. And you're right, the requirement of a balanced list has changed my approach to list building and how I view things, in that, you build a list and you're like, it's perfect! I don't have any solos!
You're like, oh man, the points all totally work out! And you're like, wait a minute. I've got 1 Spell Martyr.
Yeah,
and
exactly. And so it's been a relearning process, but being on the table, it feels very natural to me. Like the state of scenarios have gotten more prevalent, but the game kind of is building more towards balance rather than skews. You can play into skews to contest and stuff, but if you want to actively be part of the game, you need to have Orbeez troops, solos, and either battle engines or be prepared to get your caster committed somewhere. And there are a lot of tiers that do not lend themselves to building that way either.
Oh, for sure. There's definitely a level of, I'm not entirely sure that that the theme forces have caught up with what the scenario packet looks like. Like
I
there
feel that
needs
way
to be a
too.
little bit more crossover there. But
Yeah.
all right. Well, where do you want to start? Like obviously we're taking this episode and we're going to kind of talk about what we're learning and what we're playing so far. Where do you want to go with it?
Well, I feel like we have two main areas that you and I have overlapped in our practice and our training and our thought process. And that would be we've both experimented both list building and on the table with Absalonia and Gargantuans. Double Gargantuan, triple Gargantuan is really fun and good. And then we've both played the shit out of some Primal Terrors recently.
Oh, for sure. Uh, Man, I think of my last 8 games, 7 out of 8 have been Primal Terrors.
Mm.
And even if you step back, like even more like a lot of my games, well, a mix after that. But of the 2 tournaments, 7 out of 8 of my games have been with Primal Terrors.
And a majority of it's been with Kallus. He's just been sunk in for you.
Well, if by majority you mean 100%. Because of my last 8 games, I played 1 game with Absalonia 1 in Oracles, and the other 7 games were all Kallus.
So we should definitely talk about that. You know, you got a lot of table experience, but I think it's interesting that, one, we both were immediately drawn to the idea of Kallus and Primal Terrors, and then it was like starting RFP all over again, because once you sunk your teeth in the Kallus, you're like, hey, Emmanuel, wouldn't any other caster other than Kallus be interesting? And I'm like, no, Kallus seems amazing. I'm going to play. And you're like throwing things at me. You're like, but wouldn't this just be brokenness? And I'm like, yes, I get that you really want to play some Kallus. But then you got out there and you represented, man. You took down a tournament just like slaying with Kallus. Just,
Spoiler alert.
Sorry, I'm so excited for you.
No, when I was first picking up this stuff, I'm like, okay, I like Jake's Kallus list. I want to try it. I think the kind of classic Animag lists that we're seeing also look really fun. And so those ended up being the first 2 that I was putting together and trying to make sure that I had all the stuff to play them. And I immediately liked playing Animag, but Kallus definitely felt better in the way that I wanted to play. And so I started leaning that direction a little bit because I was just liking the overall makeup of Kallus. So then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get more games with it. And I think combine it with the fact that Kallus didn't really change much from Mark 2 to Mark 3. You know,
well. Let's talk about that, because I played
okay.
Kallus at the dawn of like Mark II when he was really first coming out, and there was nothing to play with.
I have a Kallus gold card from Gen Con, which I did not go to.
Represent.
Talk about playing a caster right away.
But that's what I'm saying. Like the casters were very different back then, but very similar. So like Kallus did not change at all from the Breath of Mark II to Mark III, but everything around him changed. Like literally nothing in his list now is something, and maybe the Spell Martyrs. Like the Spell Martyrs were there last time I played Kallus.
Yeah, I don't even know if I put Spell Martyrs in his list though.
I liked it
when I played him originally. But no, you are 100% right. Like I would say you are completely accurate on that. That what I was playing with Kallus, like back when I first started playing Kallus, I was playing like 35-point games, right? I wasn't even playing a 50-point game. A lot of the tournaments were still smaller, and it was very, very different animal. But what I mean is when I'm playing Kallus, like his spell list is exactly the same.
Yes.
The way that you are going to play him and support the army is the same, and so it definitely felt comfortable because Kallus was one of my very first casters that I was playing a whole bunch right before my very first tournaments, and I brought him to my first tournament. I just didn't end up playing him because I was on a Super Bethane kick.
Yeah, you get on those kicks for casters.
Right, but I played him a whole bunch, and I was like, I want to play this caster more. And so I remember in the last round of that tournament, it was me and Joel, and we actually both decided to like play the caster that we hadn't normally played. Like he brought Gorton and McBain, and I had Kallus and Bethane, and we were like, well, we've played Gorton versus Kallus like a million times, so let's just go ahead and play McBain versus Bethane and see what happens. but so I liked Jake's list.
Hmm.
JVM's list was strong right off the bat. I played it,
You called
and
it perfect.
yeah, as soon as I was playing it, I was like, dude, I think this list is probably perfect. I don't think I can't Gudrun is perfect for it. Like this really is like a 100% perfect list. And I was struggling with that a little bit because I'm like, I don't think I can make any adjustments here. Like this list is just phenomenal. I don't and there's been times on Discord that we'll talk about it, and it's just like you don't fuck with perfection. Right? Like it's just that good. Um but I had this idea when I was playing around. I don't even remember exactly how I stumbled onto it. Um, but I was playing around with switching out the Blightbringer for Golab and two Nerfs. And then that adjusted it's a little bit more battle group points. You don't have the Harrier,
Hmm.
but it's still more points. Um, and so I had to drop. I ended up dropping the one of the chosen for a unit of warmongers. And so in JVM's list, you're actually getting Amok for free, if I recall. And so you end up
Yes.
gaining some points because now I'm getting Gorag for free instead. And uh, but chosen Gorag, I still liked that mix. I liked the additional map fixing and the sort of stuff that he brought in there. But I'm playing a flying beast package, and I had posted it on Facebook and got some creative input from the man Pagani, and I was just like, oh, I'm gonna give it a try. I'm gonna give it a try. I want to see how this plays. And as soon as it was on the table, it reminded me of how I was playing Kallus kind of mid to late Mark II, where I was trying him with some angels because I was like, if you run really infantry heavy, I was finding that a lot of the time I'm like, I don't really know how much damage I'm going to do because I'm not just buying attacks. I'm getting a lot of these attacks. I don't know how many are going to hit. It
Hmm.
was really difficult to kind of gauge what is 5 or 6 infantry models going to end up doing. And that was one of the things that always bothered me about running infantry was the kind of the increased variability of it compared to a heavy to a certain extent. So I found having a flying piece that could get in there and like, oh, I will just put 5 guys into this and see if I finish it off. I do. If I don't, boom, Angel comes in, armor pierce, right? Finish that shit off. Wherever it's necessary when you start flooding the table. Or if they kill off the heavies, the Angel with Dark Guidance just like overtakes, kills a few more infantry or whatever.
Definitely.
But having flying heavies to manipulate over your army that can kind of clear off pathways that don't get jammed up. That I loved that.
I think that's really important in Mark III too, because we've talked about how much bigger the game is and how the tiers allow for free models and bigger armies. And so the fact that you have this massive infantry army that's not necessarily good at, repositioning itself, like the war beast to be able to commit and finish in where those infantry do work and then get out of the way so more infantry can get in and do work is so interesting. I really enjoy um, when you first brought that beast package to me, you told me about it, and I've played around with it in my mind, going, okay, well, if this wave goes in, then this one goes in and sprints away, then this wave can go in. And so you start doing the math on like combining the heavies with the infantry, and I think that there's a lot of validity to it. And I'm sure at first glance, some people are going to go, but there's not a Blightbringer.
I know, and the Blightbringer is so good. But yeah, so I ended up playing it. So it's not that dissimilar from the JVM list, but it switches the Blightbringer for
It's
Golab and
drastic.
2 Nerfs, and then you have 1 unit of Chosen, 2 units of Rotwing, still have the double Hellmouth. You have Gorag and a unit of Warmongers, and then you
That's
have
different from JVM.
a Feral Geist and a Spell Martyr.
Yes.
And it still has Amok as well. But what this does is that I'll usually position the warmongers so they're opposite to either infantry or they're just opposite to whatever table seems a little bit better for them. Uh, like obstruction sides because of vengeance, I'm more likely to put them on a side with obstruction than I am the chosen, because the
Mm-hmm.
chosen have to have more direct paths where I can put like one warmonger out or maybe 2 and have the other ones kind of hiding behind a building, and then they vengeance out around. And so the fact that they were behind a building to begin with isn't a big deal. But So after trying, I brought this list to a tournament, and I don't even remember why I made that decision that morning. I'm like, fuck it, I want to try it. Um, and I played it round 1, 2, and 3, and I won all of those games fairly dominantly. And I was immediately hooked on how much versatility I have, especially when you factor in that compared to a lot of the infantry that we had back in Mark II or something, both of my units of birds have reposition and the Chosen have reposition. So it almost feels like I'm having a mini Veil 1 feat turn every turn, right? Because it's like birds go in, kill stuff or damage stuff, and then reposition to like hand out the -1 defense wherever I want it or get out of the way, and then Chosen go in, they charge in, like murder stuff, and then reposition to spread out. And then having like the Nerefs and the Golab just be able to go over, kill whatever I want, and then move back, maybe block LOS to Kallus, block LOS to the Hellmouths. That was one of the things I've loved about this Beast package, was it gives me versatility to put 2 heavies either in front of Kallus or in front of the Hellmouth. So in some situations where I don't want them taking free shots on a Hellmouth early in the game, I will fly 2 heavies in front of it and just be like, I'm going to keep this Hellmouth around. I don't really want you shooting it just yet.
Well, and you need to do that because, like, say with the Blightbringer, right, you can shoot one of your tentacles and drop the aura on it to give it the +2 armor and make it harder to kill at range. But this is just outright denying it and saying, can you kill 2 heavies to get in my Hellmouth? Probably not.
Yeah. It also allows me to, one, be able to sprint with the heavies back to wherever they need to control. In addition, it also, obviously the army just really feels like it gets to be wherever it wants to be, and it doesn't really hurt Kallus in any way, because a lot of the time if I'm casting Dark Guidance, I need the Fury back anyway. And so even though I'm running 3 heavies with no Fury management, it's never really an issue. And Nerefs are threshold 9, so if I do have to leave one on them, they're still pretty likely to be fine. So anyway, first tournament, I play with it 3 rounds in a row, just crush. And then I played Absalonia 1 into Kruger to finish out that event. And that I played very aggressively, and I think I made some very key tactical errors in what I was going to prioritize. And that game, it was okay, but eventually I lost on scenario on that one. Eventually getting ahead on attrition, but behind on scenario significantly to Kruger.
What? You lost on scenario to Kruger too? Right? That like never happens.
But then I got to play the list again. I brought Kallus1 and Kallus2 to an event at Mox. Lots of strong players. We had people from Olympia, from Portland, from Vancouver. And that I just Kallus1'd all day long and went 4-0 with the list. And, round 1, I was playing it into Mordekar, and I was going second, and I just remember going into the bottom of 2, as he's kind of ending his turn, he says to me, I don't think there's going to be a lot of scoring this game. And I immediately was like, oh man, he has no idea what's about to happen. Like, yes, you have some high defense stuff and Mordekar's feat with dodge and poltergeist, but I'm going to hit everything. And I went up 3-0 on his feat turn, and that was basically the moral of the story of how most of my games have gone with this, that I just, as soon as I can score, I clear zones. And then I score, and then I'm always contesting. It is so rare that an opponent has been able to actually clear out a zone that I have stuff in. Even, I played a game against Kruger in the 3rd round of the event, and I still won 5-0 against Kruger. He did not score a single point against me. Now, I don't think most Kruger games are going to go that way, because Kruger's a baller, but it was causing some real problems that, like, every time he was killing something, there was now an incubi, and the list just, the popular Kruger 2 list just only has so many attacks. And then as soon as you don't have an upkeep out, the Wold Weirds are just not doing quite as much work.
I agree. After playing Kallus, and having played into Bones, I think that in general, Primal Terrors does really good at contesting and keeping your opponent from scoring. I've never played a game with, I wouldn't say never, I haven't played a game with PT yet where I felt like I'm just getting completely rolled on scenario. Like, most of the time, I'm either up by a point or two, or the game's just kind of stalled out until one of us decides we're going to do something about scenario. And then you're right about Kruger too. That is definitely a list where if you can put yourself in a position to where, like, the math skews get bad for him and some die rolls go poor, there are only a certain amount of attacks he can make, and then his attrition value shrinks greatly. And if he's not winning on scenario and he's not winning on attrition, he's not winning.
Right. But yeah, so I've now played the list 7 times. It's undefeated, and I'm already thinking, like, this is a great list. I'm going to take a little break from it before I get too hooked on it and try some other things. And I want to try that Beast package with Thagrosh.
Okay.
Now, I don't, as we were talking about earlier, I don't think it's right for Animag. And like, I shared the episode with you. I love the tactical tips guys. And they asked my question on the show. I was just kind of curious what everybody else thought. It was like, is the Blightbringer auto-occlude with Animag? And honestly, I think it probably is. Animag,
to reference for all the people listening, Charles and I were talking about it before the podcast, not earlier in the podcast, for all the people who have joined. Also, shout out to Jonathan, Wildwing Zero, and Rodney, who have all commented. Thanks, guys, for tuning in.
Yep. But yeah, I think Animag is going to run Blightbringer because the fact that her feat doesn't work on beasts and that her strength buff doesn't work on beasts. I don't think she wants the beast package in the way that I think Kallus or Thagrosh could do it. And so I think she's definitely going to run a Blightbringer version. But I was kind of curious what some of the super professionals like Pat and Tim would say on that. Because it does seem like Blightbringer is pretty much just perfect for her. So from there, like, I'm super excited about Kallus, and now it's time to, like, figure out what to pair with it, and in the meantime, also probably practice some Thagrosh lists, because, again, something we talked about before the cast, I got into Legion for Thagrosh and Ogryn.
Yes.
Might be a decent time to play this game. But,
seems good for us Legion Ogryn players, I'm not gonna lie.
For sure. All right, so how you've gotten some games in now. What are you excited about? What's your learning experiences so far?
So I have 2 roads that I want to go on this, but since we're talking about Primal Terrace, let's keep the discussion there so that we can stay topical.
Okay.
I played through Kallus, Thags, and Animag right now, and I have to say, out of the casters, Animag was the one who I was just like, oh yes, all the goodness, I really enjoy it, she hits all the buttons for me. And I could have told you that looking on paper, like we've discussed in the past.
You did tell me that just looking on paper. You're like, she does everything. And we're like, yeah, I mean, you've got accuracy buff. You've got defense buff. You've got damage output buff. You've got tough denying feat. You've got upkeep removal. You've got, you have, like, it is a very complete package. Like, and then on top of it, you're like, well, she doesn't really extend threat ranges. Well, no, she has Gallows too. So
funny story about that. Way back in the day, I was on a Chain Attack episode as a Legion aficionado, believe it or not, and we were talking about the Archangel when it first came out, and I was saying that I really liked the idea of her with, I think it was Bethane at the time had Gallows, right?
Yes.
And so I really liked him with Gallows because I thought it supported basically what she wanted to do. She needed a shooting package and something that could anchor. But also, Gallows was one of the only things in Legion that would extend the threat range because there were no threat range extenders in Legion. And I was having this discussion very recently in a game shop where somebody was like, oh, well, the only problem with the Animag and the Blightbringer in general is she doesn't extend its threat range. And I looked at him, and I looked back at Animag, and I looked at him, and I was like, you haven't played against a
Are we looking at the same card?
And it's probably my least cast spell on her spell list, but up front, like when I go and I look at a list of casters and I'm flipping through them, there are certain things that are going to catch my eye, and they have since Mark 1 all the way due to Mark 3. Some of those things have stayed true. And if you ever listen to back on one of our RFP stuff when we used to do podcasts, you'll know I love Hex Blast. I just like being able to target, deny people's upkeeps. Having that in my toolbox between my casters, even in my main caster, is just clutch for me. And I think that addiction probably started with Resnick, and then from there, it was just like, have to have a Hex Blast caster or some kind of caster like Purification caster as an out in my pair. And
well,
so
it's kind of nice that you also, like, it's not just like casting. Obviously, casting Purification is great, right? It's really consistent. But there is a bonus to being like, I'm going to kill one of the models in your unit and remove the upkeep off the unit. Or I'm going to hit you with this POW 13, but I'm going to remove your armor buff on hit. So since you're losing 2 armor, now it's effectively like a POW 15, and then everything else doesn't have to worry about your armor buff.
I really like it when I know I need to soften up a heavy and they've put an upkeep on it. It's like a double win for me, because Animag doesn't need to do a whole lot with her Fury. She can do a whole lot with her Fury, but she's getting a free spell anyways. Like, she's effectively like a 9 or 10 Fury Warlock almost every turn because of that free spell. And I can't tell you how many times where I just end up camping 3 or 4 because it's like, well, I don't need another strength buff. I don't need the accuracy buff. Like, the list is doing just fine. And so I'm like, what can I Hex Blast this turn? And it's one of the reasons I've actually started popping Spell Martyrs back into the list, is that sometimes a free Hex Blast is the right spell. And sometimes just the free damage is the right part of that free spell that you really need. So,
well, especially if you run a version with the birds, right? With Rotwings, we were like, well, I have to damage this model so they get Finisher. I might as well debuff them and damage the model to trigger Finisher.
Perfect.
Win-win.
Speaking of that, so that's the only change I've made to my list so far, and I actually really enjoyed the version of the list that I have, and I may go back to it. It was Animag, Blightbringer, 2 Harriers, 2 Spell Martyrs, the War Chief. It also had a Muck, and then it has the 2 Hellmouths, Warmongers, and Gorag, and then 2 units of Chosen. And I kind of felt in the games that I've played so far that the extra Harrier has been super redundant. But I've also felt that there is going to be that game where I'm just like, I need this guy to go fly over here and score, because I can contest the hell out of that zone all day, but I need to score that zone. And the 1 Harrier has been doing pretty good, and Blightbringer's been able to like overlap on 2 zones in a lot of games. So I thought, let me try something else. And you had suggested a minimum unit of Rotwings, and I went and I looked at some of the WTC lists, and I saw that also popping up in that minimum unit of Rotwings, and I said, okay, let me try that out. And I like them as just little feet bombs too, on top of being able to give the -1 defense, on top of being just another unit to go and reposition or score or whatever you need it to be, on top of being a clearing unit for the Chosen and a jam unit for your Warmongers. They just get to POW 15 on feet turn if you want them to. POW 15 finishers are just like, oh, you brought a Colossal. Well, I brought a minimum unit of Rotwings. Guess I have something I can do here.
Yeah, I've been really impressed with what Rotwings can end up pulling off.
Me too. Straight up.
Big fan of the unit.
I've had 1 or 2 just surprisingly kill stuff that they shouldn't have killed.
Yeah, I mean, Finisher's not Weapon Master, but it's pretty good.
You know, when it turns on at the right time, it's good. But it's easy to overlook the unit once you've killed most of them, and you're like, oh, you have 4 Rotwings. I don't care that much about 4 Rotwings. And it's like, do you though? Those are 4 flying Rotwings, and you have 1 damage on your caster because I unbound your spell.
Oh, that's hilarious. I love that little random piece of synergy. But yeah, honestly, just the fact that they're flying helps in so many cases where it just like, you know, I can fly over the front arc of that Colossal to get to the other side, so I have more room for everybody. There's a lot of little tricksiness there. But yeah, I'm not really surprised that you ended up liking playing Animag.
Nope, she just fits for me, and I think it's a slam dunk. It's everything I want in a caster. It's everything I want the list to do. At first, I felt that up front, I wanted the Primal Terrors to be more attrition-based, and that I wanted to be harder to kill, because the double chosen with the healing factors, all of the tough models. It's like 250 something boxes with the Blightbringer. You're just like, it's so much beef. And you want to add to that beef. You want to make it even harder to kill. You want to make the most unkillable anvil ever. And while that's fine, when I played Animag, I felt that she made it just hard enough to kill where I needed it to be hard enough to kill, that I was okay with it. And that she is not dependent on a bubble, so that way I can put my spell somewhere a little further away from her, which is nice. And then I think you coined it when we were talking about her once in chat, where you basically said her thing is, I'm going to say kill the world, and then I try to. And I think
she's definitely a kill the world warlock.
She's definitely kill the world warlock, and I think that, you know, with between the alpha strike and killing a lot of things, sometimes unexpectedly between her feet and all the spells and everything, and Hellmouths being randomly powerful when they want to be, you can go way up on attrition value and then still be reasonably hard to kill because you have 250 something boxes to chew through.
Yes.
So now I'm on the quest to find a pair.
Yes, I think that's really kind of the quest for both of us. So let's talk a little bit about the casters that we're thinking about. And obviously chat brought up Thagrosh 2.
Yeah.
And this is one that I've made a couple of lists for so far. And I'm actually still leaning Primal Terrors for Thags 2, which I think there's obviously some Oracles lists that you can build, especially playing like a hit and run style feat with angels and even Nerifs and stuff. Like, there's some cool stuff to do there.
I built a Primal Terrors list too, so let's see if we've built the same Primal Terrors list.
Well, I have a couple versions so far, but I'll explain why I'm leaning on Primal Terrors at the moment. And just with the design of the current scenario packet, we mentioned this a little bit at the beginning of the episode, but I really like having a mixed beast unit package, and especially when you're doing stuff like Chosen as opposed to Rotwings, for instance. One of the things I didn't like doing back in Mark II was just giving somebody a unit that their anti-infantry stuff would be effective against. But now, if you're running Chosen, you really have to dedicate the same kind of attacks to them that you would be dedicating to heavies. And so it's not allowing your opponent to get work out of something that you didn't want them to get work out of. And so, again, so coming back, like, if I look at an Oracles list, right, and if I want to run even one full unit of Hex Hunters with almost every caster, like, there's what, 3 casters that can run a full unit of Hex Hunters? You know, it's Kallus and Absolonia 1.
It's the 30 pluses.
Yeah, and Lilith 1, and then also Krissa. So there's 4. There's only 4 of our warlocks who can actually run a full unit of Hex Hunters in Oracles and then still get all 3 of the free solos. And so as soon as you're thinking, well, I'll play, you know, Ice Witches and Hex Hunters, and I'll only get 2 free solos. And then at that point, it's like, well, why not play Primal Terrors and run 40 points of units and get 2 free solos or 2 free Hellmouths, and then you're getting more points or the same free points, but then you have access to GoLab.
Better units, and the armor buff is more relevant.
Right, and so that's where I've been kind of coming back and going, well, maybe it's okay to play a Primal Terrors list. So I've been making a couple different versions of Thagrosh 2, either going really heavy on the units and more completely playing up his strength, because I just think him with Gorag, so that he can be effectively Mat 9, and if you can run the War Chief, he's effectively Mat 10, and then with GoLab, he can sprint, and he's speed 6 now, and flight, so he can fly in front of shit, murder stuff with Mat 10, POW 18 attacks, and just be like, pop, 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 and then fly back behind the armor.
How'd that go again?
Pop, 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 pop.
Nailed it.
I don't know. I should like go a little like more bass in that, like pop, 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 pop. But
I think for Thagrosh it'd be something like,
yeah, everything blows up, and then there's clouds and
clouds, free clouds.
Yeah, for sure. So. Like, that's definitely something that I want to try out. I haven't quite figured out what I want the list to look like and what I want that exact beast package to look like, but I think roughly it's going to be a unit of Chosen, a unit of Warmongers with Gorag, and then 2 Hellmouths, plus Goat, or 2 units. Sorry, the unit of Warmongers has Gorag, and then the battle group starts off with Golab. Probably will run Amok, because who doesn't want Thags to stand up for free too? And then have an ability to remove, penalizing upkeeps. And then just figure out what you want to do from there. Do you want another unit of Chosen? Do you want some Rotwings to run around and hand out buffs? And then what kind of beast package do you want? Like Typhon, Carnivian? Do you want Angels that can work with his feet and murder stuff and come back? Or do you want to run the Nerfs like I was doing with Kallus? I think there's some stuff to play around with there, and I want to see. I need to play some games with it, but I think Thagrosh 1 is next on my radar, but Thagrosh 2 is definitely of interest to me. So let me bounce it back to you. What are you potentially leaning towards, for that second list to pair with Animag?
To pair with Animag, I have no idea. I think here's my problem, is that the casters that I want to play are pretty similar to Animag. Mm-hmm. I think Animag's biggest strength is that she kills the world. So I probably want something that's hard to kill in return. So the 2 casters that I've considered the most that have been outside of the Primal Terror's wheelhouse, because we could both talk about Thagrosh 2 and Primal Terrors all day. And that's a very possible reality for me, in that I have to bring minimal models, but Thags just changes the dynamic of it.
Yeah.
But I really think that I can't actually remember her name now. Fayana.
Yeah.
So Fayana and Oracles is a very different list, and I think that there's a lot of room to play around with not playing double battle engines, so that you get all the solos and maximize out the list. And there's enough fury management and enough flying beasts that don't need a whole lot of fury that I think that she can handle it. And the high defense skew plus bringing fury to the table and admonition, it's kind of a questions list. And I think that's good to pair with Animag, because Animag's my answer list. She has an out to armor, she's got an out to high defense, but there are some problems that she runs into. And so if I see that somebody's got the answer to my Animag list, then I give them a problem and say, can you solve this other completely different problem? And there's no overlap in healing or anything. But the other list I really want to try more of, and I got to try it a little bit and enjoyed the hell out of it, was Absalonia 1 with triple Gargantuan.
I still want to try this. I got to try it at least once, right?
So you got to try it more than once. I played it once and went, I need a lot more games with this. But there was a lot of validity to it. So the problem in pairing it with Primal Terror is now you have 2 lists that focus on healing a lot. And so if your opponent has an out to healing, they have an out to both your lists. But I will argue that if your opponent has an anti-legion list, that they have anti-healing in it, and so chances are you're going to face that list regardless. So not giving them something to deal with it is one thing, but they're going to shoot your beast to make them not to be able to heal or whatever they're going to be using anyway. Yeah. So you're going to deal with that.
Yeah.
Vulcan. But the list, it has both Archangels shooting their big guns, which have AoEs, and then the Blightbringer also has a massive AoE. And so on the approach, you have a good gun line to lay down some fire and drop the amount of things that can get into you. And then once you've kind of spread out into the scenarios, it gets a little more complicated. Because you have to both keep Absalonia alive and be committed to all 3 of your Gargantuans and still be in a position where you're contesting all the zones and relevant in the fight. And it's not easy to do with 3 Gargantuans, but it's not impossible to do. And I played it against Retribution, and I think the only reason I really lost is that Assyria with Mage Hunter Strike Force is bullshit. So,
and it's particularly rough for a caster like Absalonia. She's at the stat line that's pretty rough for Strike Force.
Well, and I was in a position, so I went second. He moved up his AD troops, and the Archangels were able to shoot enough Strike Force to where I felt mathematically it'd be really tough to kill me. And I made the rookie mistake here. I didn't feat defensively, and I know how terrible that sounds with Absalom, and you think, why would I do that, right? But when it comes to rapid healing and the amount of shots that they're going to put into a gargantuan to kill it, you're healing a fuck ton of boxes over the amount of turn from a fully health
Oh
gargantuan.
yeah, rapid
And
healing in itself is pretty powerful.
yeah, and so his choice was, well, since I can't kill Absolonia, I pull my entire list into one gargantuan and kill it. Now can your 2 gargantuans deal with the rest of my list? And I went for the assassination out instead, which admonition on a flying model is difficult to deal with, and I didn't unpack it properly because I didn't have enough models. But I tried to like fly a Hellion behind her, and then an Archangel on one side, and then put the Blightbringer in front of her. But there was just enough space for her to run away.
Okay, so one of the questions that we have in the chat, and I'll let you answer this first. Do you think Animag is the new Veil 2 from Mark II?
Okay, so is Primal Terrors the new Machinations of Shadow? Possibly. Is Animag a caster that has outs for most things like Veil 2? Very possibly. But is she Veil 2? No. Veil 2's pressure game was just different. She made you feel like, if I came out of my deployment zone this game, do I die? Like, she made you feel like, if I walk into the scenario zone, do I just lose this for nothing? And that's not really Animag's game. Animag's the targeted nuke, where she's like, I just want to do work on this side of the board, and I'm going to do it.
Well, I think the question probably comes from that we're talking about. It's a caster that really does kind of do everything, and that was something that Veil 2 was back in Mark II. But I definitely specialized in Veil 2. Like, I was definitely guilty
for sure.
of that.
You were the guy.
And I will tell you that Veil 2, if you're comparing her to Animag, it's almost like a polar opposite. Veil 2 kind of did everything defensively. She had the out for, shooting with, occultation. She had the out for melee with admonition. She had the managing positioning with refuge and cycling refuge. She's basically has the out for almost everything defensively. She was always removing people's buffs, and so they're going to the next turn having to recast buffs, which minimizes how much offense they have. She really was everything in a defensive way. And
she got it all for free for one turn, which made her so backbreaking.
Right. Whereas Animag is really everything you want offensively. But doesn't really she's got the armor buff, right? And that's cool. But that's not that's kind of the least important thing that she does. You're playing Animag because you want to just murder the world.
But you're playing Animag because you really want to take Primal Terrors in that extreme killy direction. But I think Primal Terrors can go in any direction. I mean, somebody in the cast here, or in the chat, asked about Primal Terrors with Thags 1, and that's basically a direction you're stepping right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what Animag does, but I also like a little bit more defensive shtick. I like having some game to protect my pieces and preserve where I want them, and then I think that's additionally powerful in this scenario packet. So as much as I'm loving Kallus, I think Thags 1 can play a very similar game, and so I'm going to try. I want to try David's list that we talked about in episode 2, and I have purchased and assembled my second and third units of Warmongers, so I can try that list, which would be Blightbringer, Golab, triple Warmongers is essentially the core of it. But I'm also going to try it with the new Beast package, double Neref and Golab, and have a sprinting Thagrosh when you want him, and then have double Chosen and Warmongers with Amok, and so I'm excited about that too. But I also want to play around with that Beast package a little bit. Try Typhon instead of 2 Nerefs. Try a Carnivean instead of 2 Nerefs. Both improve the solo package for that.
I really like Thags with Sprint. I mean, the more I think about it, the better it gets. So, like, he charges in, he kills some things, he makes some clouds and sprints farther back. So now he's got line of sight blocking for other things, too. Like, you can actually prep him to be like, oh, I want the X to go make some clouds for me this turn.
Yeah. He makes some thags for, he kills some front stuff, pops some clouds, then sprints back, and then Golab kills stuff further back and doesn't take damage from the AoEs because his AoE specifically says enemy models. So Golab gets to go forward, murder some stuff, and then fly back behind the clouds.
I love it.
Right. I'm a fan. So I mean, right now Golab is my favorite beast, but I think if I were like right now, if I was like gonna pick like the top 4 casters in Legion, I would probably guess that Thagrosh1 is in that.
I think as long as your opponent can't deny your feat, that's one of the strongest feats in the game to just make you fight against an extra heavy. It's like, imagine in an attrition term where it was reversed, where your opponent went down a heavy for free, and there's plenty of offensive feats that basically give you that. This is that in reverse, but the addition, the recursion, the additional heavy works differently because it's psychologically something you can play with where you can force your opponent to focus fire at something that's going to come back. And if they don't deal with it, they get screwed by it, like Golab or Carnivian. And then you're still going to get work out of it late game. It's an early and late game feat because of the pressure it puts on your opponent to make choices early game and then what you can do with it late game by bringing a beast back.
Right, and we should probably mention the main reason why with Thagrosh1, if you're going to run Blightbringer and Golab, the main reason why you're going to end up leaning towards Warmongers is because of the price point. You can't run 60 points worth of the Ogryn stuff and get in Golab and a Blightbringer. So Warmongers allow you to do something really efficiently for a little bit less points. Now, that's not to say that War Spears are not potentially a good option in there, but I think Thagrosh1 is a little less likely to use them, and a little bit more likely to want his negative strength aura protecting Chosen and Warmongers who have Unyielding. But I do think, like, one of the things I want to try is Animag with triple units of War Spears, or 2 units of War Spears and 1 Warmongers with Gorag to pump up their accuracy. Because her buff is a strength buff, and she's one that can actually buff all 3 units, and does not need one of them to go first. And she could even potentially dump a strength buff on someone during a vengeance attack. So War Spears, it's just really the cost that kind of holds them back a little bit. But I think, especially if you've got a community that's prepping for Primal Terrors and they want to make sure they're doing well there, I think shaking things up and doing something like War Spears is going to really throw off their game plan. And that's something I definitely want to try. I'm going to put in some games with Animag, even though I think you're probably going to be the one specializing in her. I want to try her with triple War Spears. And I've also got a list that's going to be 1 unit of War Spears and then triple Warmongers with her.
Just 4 units?
Yes. I think hitting Blightbringer plus 4 units really pushes her attrition game up a notch, and she has a little bit more survivability.
It's very miserable Meat Mountain style.
Yeah, one of the things that I worry about is I always think about how things can go wrong, and I worry that if you lose too many units, then her offensive punch goes down a lot because her strength buff is units only. Her feat, it only affects units. Now, obviously, the units can hand out Dark Shroud to an enemy that then a beast can benefit from, but they don't get grievous wounds. And so that is something to think about, and I'm always thinking about how can things go wrong. And that's one of my concerns with Animag is if you do run out of units, or if you are pressuring with the Blightbringer to draw attacks away from your units, and then you lose the Blightbringer too quickly. And she can't put her armor buff on the Blightbringer. So there's these things to manage with her that I think for my play style are going to make me lean towards Thagrosh1 and Kallus, and maybe Thagrosh 2. We'll have to see. But
so just to satisfy the question, my Thagrosh1 list with the Blightbringer is a Muck Blightbringer, and I run the Carnivian, you run Golab, Harrier, Warmonger, Warchief, Feral Geist, 2 Hellmouths. I run Warmongers and Rotten Eye, and then a unit of Chosen.
All right. Well, I think we've covered what we wanted to in this episode. So do you have a Blight Makes Right moment yet? I know you've had a few games. Do you feel like you have one, or do you want me to do one this episode and give you some more time?
Oh, I can definitely do one.
Okay.
So I'm playing Animag into Bones, and my opponent goes, well, I have 3 heavies on this side of the table, and you have 1 unit of Chosen in between me and the Blightbringer. I should totally be able to kill all of those Chosen and get to the Blightbringer. Well, it turns out that one Chosen who makes tough checks and heals a lot is really hard to get rid of. And my Blightbringer in return got to eat 3 heavies. So at that moment, my opponent looked at me, and I looked back at him, and I told him, I think this is my first Blight Makes Right moment.
Aw, we choose you.
I felt very special about it. But no, it was amazing. I mean, Chosen are just so good. They're everything I wanted them to be.
Yes, they're so great. All right, listeners, thank you for listening to the episode, even if you weren't listening live. But thank you to everyone who checked out the show live and interacted with us. We're having a blast. We're looking forward to recording more episodes and dragging on more guests. But we want to share a little bit of like our explorations, and we will have a lot more coming for you. And we are going to have a surprise where we're going to doubly, both of us are going to go guest host another show. So
yes,
we'll have that coming as well. So thank you, everybody. Good night, and Blight Makes Right.